One question I get asked a lot is, what's a good vlogging camera for YouTube? And I've noticed that most people that ask that question don't want to spend more than $200. Now, admittedly, that's a little bit difficult in this day and age because the price of everything is kind of through the roof, but it actually can be done. So I had the idea to film this little series where we'll just take a look at cameras that come into that $200 or less price range and are actually still pretty solid cameras. This is more of just an ongoing series looking at really solid cameras that come in at $200 or less, and we're also going to look at why you might choose one over the other and help you kind of figure out which one sort of best suits your needs. Anyway, having said that, let's roll the video. Now, one thing you might want to consider is the DJI Osmo Pocket, especially if you're doing these kinds of like walk and talk vlogs. Osmo Pocket has some of the absolute best image stabilization in the world because it's literally just a camera on a tiny gimbal. You know, I mean, it's so small and easy to carry with you, and no one really pays attention to it. Osmo Pocket doesn't really land on people's radar because it doesn't really even look like a camera. I think to the average person, it looks like you're just sort of walking around with a little stick in your hand. The other thing too is the Osmo Pocket has absolutely great image quality. You know, it's a 1/1.7-inch sensor, and they are doing so much with that. Especially if you're using that flat picture profile, it gives you so much room for color grading. Image quality for me is like one of my favorites in terms of these like really small, easy to carry around cameras. You know, another thing that I like is it has a mic input. I mean, it's not a traditional mic input, but it does have a USB-C port, and DJI actually makes a little adapter so you can use a 3.5mm mic going into the USB-C and you can get better audio that way. Definitely would recommend that. I mean, especially in a situation like this where, I mean, the water is noisy, it's windy out here. You would otherwise have like a ton of noise, but instead you're able to use a lav mic and kind of like isolate your own voice a little bit better. You know, another thing, for a tiny sensor camera, the Osmo Pocket actually has surprisingly decent low light performance. I mean, it's not on par with something full frame like a Sony a7S III, but for a tiny sensored camera, it's really not that bad. Another thing I like about the Osmo Pocket is it does give you really good slow motion. The only catch is it has 120 frames per second, but that's baked into a 30 frames per second file. It kind of handles it the way that an iPhone does, where it slows it down in camera for you, which is kind of a bummer, especially if you're filming in a 24 frames per second timeline like me. But having said that, it is still like a nice option for B-roll. Now, if you're in the mood for a full-size camera, one thing you might want to consider is the Sony Nex5R. Now, this is a full-on APS-C size sensor camera. It's a little bit older, you know, but it does share the exact same lens mount with the modern Sony a6000 line, and you know, it gives you a ton of really good lens options for this camera. One of the things I like about the Nex5R is it is very small and lightweight and easy to use, and yet it still has actually really good build quality. It's a pretty sturdy metal design, you know. NEX line was actually pretty premium for its time, and it shows. Autofocus on the Nex5R is also pretty good. You know, it's got phase detect autofocus, but it's not like modern Sony phase detect autofocus, so it's not going to be on par with, say, anything from the a6000 line, and definitely not anything from the a7 line. But for a camera of this age range and a camera of this price point, the autofocus is actually pretty good. You know, another nice bonus with the NEX 5R is it actually has pretty good low light performance. So, you know, unlike the Osmo Pocket, if you're going to film at night a lot or indoors a lot, the NEX 5R is actually worth considering because it's going to give you much better low light than any of those like small sensor cameras. Now, on the other hand, there are some downsides in that the NEX 5R doesn't have a mic input, so the audio you're hearing right now is basically a lav mic plugged into my phone. The other big drawback with the NEX 5R, if you're doing a lot of these like walk and talk type vlogs, is there is no image stabilization whatsoever. You know, and if you're just kind of stomping around, it becomes very obvious very quickly. You know, that's where something like the DJI Osmo Pocket or the GoPro Hero 7 wins out by a long shot because they have absolutely amazing image stabilization, whereas NEX 5R, you've got to be steady with your shots. Like, I'm trying to walk carefully here, and I know this footage is shaky. But if you do take the time to stabilize the footage, you are going to be happy with the image quality from the NEX 5R because it looks absolutely amazing. And lastly, one thing that you might want to consider under $200 is one of the most simple options, the GoPro Hero 7 Black. This camera is absolutely tiny. It literally fits in your pocket. It has great build quality. It's 100% waterproof, and it's one of the most user-friendly cameras on the market. I mean, the GoPro Hero 7 is one of those cameras where you don't really even have to think of it. You kind of just pick it up, hit record, start walking and talking, and there you go. It's that easy to just film your entire video. Now, of course, being an action camera, the GoPro Hero 7 does kind of suffer in low light. You know, it's just a tiny sensor, and they just can't compete with larger sensor cameras in lower light conditions. But if you are out and about in like really bright outdoor settings like this, the Hero 7 looks absolutely amazing. One of the bummers with the Hero 7 is there is no mic input. You know, GoPro does actually sell a mic adapter for it, but that's an extra 50 bucks, so that is one thing you'll have to consider. For me here today, the audio that you're hearing is the same as on the Sony NEX 5R. It's a lav mic plugged into an external audio recorder and then synced in post. You know, one of the biggest pluses to the GoPro Hero 7 is it has absolutely amazing image stabilization. This was when GoPro went from okay image stabilization on the Hero 6 to first introducing hyper smooth, and it shows. It makes a really big difference. I mean, this is the kind of camera you can actually jog like this while you're talking, and it still just keeps the whole thing steady. You know, you're definitely not going to be able to do something like that with a mirrorless camera unless you're using a gimbal. But yeah, overall, for anyone who's just filming a lot of like outdoor walk and talk, like travel video type stuff, you know, Hero 7 is definitely a really good option. So yeah, it ultimately comes down to what type of stuff are you filming. You know, if you film a lot of like walk and talk, travel video type stuff, I would definitely consider either the GoPro Hero 7 Black or the DJI Osmo Pocket. You know, both give you really good image quality and both give you really good image stabilization. Not to mention, the GoPro actually gives you a lot of different options when it comes to slow motion. But both of these cameras suffer in low light because they have such tiny sensors. Having said that, if you do find yourself filming a lot in low light, then I would lean more towards the Sony NEX 5R. The NEX 5R is going to give you absolutely excellent image quality. It's going to give you that really good low light footage, especially if you're filming indoors a lot. Plus the NEX 5R, you've got so many good lenses, so you've got a lot more variety there. Whereas with the GoPro and the Osmo Pocket, you're just kind of stuck with the lenses that the camera comes with. Anyway, I think that's all I've got for today, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again next time.